Hi there, Net Ghosts. Phantom here, and today we are going to be talking about Cyberpsychosis in this episode of our Cyberpunk Edgerunner Mission Kit deep dive. Cyberpsychosis is one of my favorite story and lore elements of the Cyberpunk universe. I'm willing to bet it might be a lot of yours too. And if you're not familiar with Cyberpsychosis or still trying to wrap your head around it, this video is also for you. Today we are going to be looking at three things. We're going to be looking at the actual lore behind cyberpsychosis, particularly the actual medical understanding of what cyberpsychosis is, and why that is so significant to this expression of the cyberpunk genre and its exploration of transhumanism. Then we are going to take a look at the video game and the anime to glean from examples of cyberpsychosis as they're presented, a little bit more of an understanding of how cyberpsychosis presents, and then finally we are going to look to the CEMK in order to explore the expanded rules we get in this book for the humanity mechanics that are used by the game to better define cyberpsychosis and how it presents, and also to set parameters around the kinds of things that happen in this brutal world of Night City that cause somebody to finally go straight over the edge. Before we dive in here, I do want to provide a content warning. Cyberpsychosis is a subject matter that involves discussions of real mental illness, particularly depersonalization and derealization disorder, as well as sociopathy and psychopathy. If these subjects are uncomfortable for you, I would recommend clicking off the video here. If you're still with me, let's continue. Okay then, let's start with this. What is cyberpsychosis? Cyberpsychosis is a dissociative disorder that is brought about by a loss of empathy for others and a lack of both self-regard and self-preservation. This is coupled with a replacement of organic body parts with cybernetic replacements or enhancements, which causes derealization. Let's start to unpack all of that. Let's start with depersonalization. Mayo Clinic defines depersonalization and derealization as a disorder that occurs when you always or often feel that you're seeing yourself from outside your body, or you sense that the things around you are not real, or both. Feelings of depersonalization and derealization can be very disturbing. You may feel like you're living in a dream. Depersonalization and derealization are more common in people who experience trauma, such as violence, abuse, or any other kinds of extreme and acute stress. Symptoms include feeling that you're seeing your thoughts, feelings, or body parts of your body from the outside, as if you're an outsider that's looking in on your own experiences. Some people even feel like they're floating in the air above themselves. Feeling like a robot, or that you're not in control of what you say or how you move. The sense that your body, legs, or arms appear twisted or like they're not quite in the right shape. Emotional or physical numbness of your senses or numbness to the world around you. A sense that your own memories lack emotion, and they may not even be your own memories. Some cases of cyberpsychosis just begin and end there, with one's self and other people, as well as the world around them, just feeling unreal, like a dream, and struggling to connect to your own experiences, thoughts, and memories. However, in some cases of cyberpsychosis, these symptoms of depersonalization are joined with psychotic symptoms and tendencies. This is especially true of people who have participated in or have been exposed to violent and dangerous situations regularly. Some of these circumstances could cause someone to develop psychopathological and sociopathic tendencies. It is those people who experience the most profound and most horrifying extents of cyberpsychosis as a disorder. This is because the sense of depersonalization and derealization that is caused by continued exposure to trauma, coupled with the fact that more and more of their body is being replaced by cold, unfeeling chrome, can lead this individual to even further use or harm others without any sense of remorse or even reality to their actions. This kind of horrible coupled mental illness can occur to individuals who've experienced all kinds of trauma, whether related to military service, criminal activities, or let's be real, just plain surviving in the dark future. Because their sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies are being enhanced by this increasing sense of unreality, their psychopathic symptoms are likely to continue to worsen. These symptoms are all covered in the Hare psychopathy checklist. These include a grandiose sense of self, a need for stimulation, cunning and manipulative thoughts and behaviors, a lack of remorse or guilt, callousness and lack of empathy, poor behavioral controls, impulsivity, a failure to accept responsibility, and criminal versatility. The Cyberpunk 2077 video game is full of examples of cyberpsychos, particularly as part of Regina Jones' quest line sending you down to incapacitate cyberpsychos that more research can be done to determine whether or not their sanity can ever be restored. But what these examples don't make clear, not everyone who plunges over the edge ends up going on a horrible and violent rampage. However, when they do, it is often with horrible consequences, and there is perhaps no more profound example of this than the example of Maine in Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Maine grew up without a father, just his mother scraping by in Portland, Maine. During his childhood, he was abused and beaten by his peers, as he was a fairly frail and small child. As he grew up, he started to take on boxing and grew stronger, more muscular, building out his frame naturally, until finally, after he won his first ever boxing match, he took his winnings and went straight to the chrome, cybering up. Following his mother's death, Maine continued to work in Portland, finding gigs as a bouncer in the city. However, his sociopathic tendencies already began to be telegraphed here. He was violent in nature, and he had trouble keeping a job because he would beat the troublesome clients to a problematic extent. One day, while working in Portland, his fortune would seemingly change. 5 NUSA Spec Ops soldiers were raising a whole lot of hell when Maine single-handedly brought them all to the ground. Maine would fight in the Central American Wars, accepting a deployment to South America. However, despite his expectations that he would be sent to fight armed soldiers in fair battle, he soon realized that he was simply being sent to raise villages and leave no survivors, decimating civilian populations. After 2 years of committing atrocities for the NUSA, Maine discharged himself. Some years later, Solomon Reed would contact Maine again. Solomon Reed was now a full-blown FIA agent, gathering intelligence for the reunification war efforts, attempting to bring Night City and the Free States back into the fold of the NUSA. Maine would decline, but he would head to Night City and start up his very own Edgerunner crew. It is at this time that Maine meets David. Eventually, as the stresses the Edgerunner crew are facing, with Arasaka's boot pressing down on their neck, a gig gone wrong, and an EMP explosion were the last 2 steps over the edge for Maine. As Maine begins to experience his first symptoms of cyberpsychosis, we witness him becoming rash, impatient, and cruel toward David and the rest of the crew, even horribly maiming and injuring Kiwi, a member that he brought on himself. He continues to dose neuroblocker after neuroblocker, but they just cannot keep up with his mounting symptoms. And soon, as the runners are flooded with NCPD, Maine finally slips, falls over the edge, and makes a final last stand. In these final moments, we witness some of the symptoms of cyberpsychosis. Maine depersonalizes. We see his conversation with David from a strange third-person point of view, mirroring some childhood flashbacks that we saw earlier in the show.
This is it. It's the end of the line for me. But not for you. Fast is what you do best, ain't it?
We see Maine lose regard for the human life of all of the NCPD officers who eventually begin begging for their lives as the situation becomes increasingly dire and horrific. Even the trauma team response is not spared as Maine slips fully over the edge. While more still needs to be learned about cyberpsychosis in the world of cyberpunk, there are a few things that are clear. Cyberpsychosis is brought on when somebody who already has sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies, usually brought about by horrible trauma in their past experiences, continues to replace more and more of their organic meat with chrome, losing their sense of self and eventually seeing people as objects. As they descend further and further, some of these individuals will exhibit more and more severe traits of psychopathy and sociopathy, eventually leading to murderous ideation that can result in catastrophe. And so finally, let's get to cyberpsychosis as it is expressed within the rules of the Cyberpunk tabletop role-playing game. There are 10 statistics for your characters in the Cyberpunk role-playing game, one of which is empathy. Empathy is described as your ability to relate and care for others, as well as take them into consideration. And empathy, importantly, offsets cyberpsychosis. For every point you put into empathy in character creation, your character has 10 humanity points, meaning that if your character starts with 8 empathy, you have a starting humanity of 80. Each time you graft cyberware onto your body, it reduces your humanity points. For example, if I want to install mantis blades, upon their installation, I'm going to need to roll 4 d6s or just take a default of 14 humanity loss. When your humanity decreases, so does your empathy stat. My starting character, with a humanity of 80, they graft on these mantis blades, and now they have a humanity of 66. When you lose humanity, your empathy stat is reduced to the 10th place of the amount of humanity that you have remaining, which means in this case, my empathy will have just decreased to 6. You can offset this loss of humanity through therapy services. Therapies for cyberpsychosis often include enhanced pharmaceuticals designed to offset the onset symptoms of cyberpsychosis, but they can also include things like therapeutic brain dances. However, it is important to note here that cyberware will always incur a humanity loss until you remove it. And so standard cyberware will permanently decrease your humanity by 2. Borgware will decrease it by 4. Until you get that chrome off of you and replace it with some kind of more human-like synthetic appendage, you have lost that sense of yourself forever, Choom. As a player's empathy stat decreases, they are encouraged to begin to roleplay their character's descent into cyberpsychosis. Of course, as we mentioned earlier in the lore section, trauma also takes its chunk from your sense of self and others. Torture can reduce your humanity, as can witnessing particularly horrific deaths and mutilations. Kidnappings or other forms of long-term abuse, or living in the devastated aftermath of some kind of disaster, or living in a state of perpetual danger for a time equal to 1 month. As your character's empathy stat decreases, they'll begin to experience more and more symptoms of cyberpsychosis. The player gets to decide which symptoms from the parapsychopathy checklist we discussed earlier their player begins to exhibit. As soon as your character's empathy reaches 2, your character is already beginning to experience dissociative symptoms, and you should roleplay accordingly. When your humanity is equal to 1, you are experiencing dissociative disorder, and you are experiencing borderline cyberpsychosis. This means that the character should be exhibiting at least 3 traits from the parapsychopathy checklist in a pronounced way that affects your roleplaying. Finally, when your humanity reaches 0, your character is experiencing cyberpsychosis, and they should be strongly exhibiting 5 of those psychopathic traits. Once you reach negative humanity, this condition is extreme cyberpsychosis. You hand your character sheet over to the GM. If that character ever gets restored back to positive humanity, the character sheet can go back to the player. But until that point, the GM will play that character according to their absolute worst tendencies. The Cyberpunk Edgerunner Mission Kit greatly expands upon these mental trauma rules, giving players and GMs tools for cyberpsychosis storytelling, allowing players to regain their humanity in certain ways, and also to lose it. Things that can incur a small amount of humanity loss would include being treated unjustly by the justice system, being successfully burglarized, or receiving a credible death threat. More severe humanity loss can be incurred from witnessing the death of a loved one, killing somebody for the first time in your life. Even further humanity loss can be incurred by killing an innocent person, or witnessing the horrible and violent death in real time of someone that you love. However, players can also regain humanity by defeating someone who wronged them, winning some kind of symbolic victory that is defining for their character, or even just making a friend in the dark future. You can gain even more humanity by saving somebody's life, or by spending a day just partying and spending a pretty decent stack of eddies. The highest humanity is, of course, just like I think in real life, bequeathed to us by experiencing some kind of wholesome and life-affirming event. This could be a childbirth, an engagement, a marriage, an adoption, something that reminds us fundamentally of the beauty of living. Now, if you're willing to really spend a chunk of change, if you and your friends truly want to party it up, and I mean for a day of partying hard, spending loads and loads of Eurodollars, you can regain a significant amount of humanity that way too. After all, the time in which we just simply get to enjoy our lives surrounded by the people that we love, those times are few and far between. Environmental effects now also impact our humanity score using the expanded rules of the CEMK. Living a kibble lifestyle, living in a cube hotel, these things can decrease your humanity. Imprisonment, starvation, or not holding a wake or some kind of ceremony for the death of a loved one can incur even more severe loss of your humanity, and experiencing some kind of devastation from a horrible event. On the other hand, spending a good portion of a whole month outside of the city, not being oppressed by the horrible, fast-paced, and careless atmosphere of city life, interacting with a true friend, or just taking a week off. These things can increase your humanity. I cannot emphasize enough how brilliant these new rules are for humanity at our table. These rules really open up the storytelling possibilities and also encourage players to actually be in the shoes of their characters. In our lives, we make decisions that impact our spirit for life, our vitality, our love for life, every single day. It just makes sense that our characters would too. And just like real life, these things are a combination of the choices that we make and the things that just happen to us. As we look toward wrapping up this video, I want to tell what I think is a powerful anecdote from my own table at our in-person play session just this weekend. My brother plays a nomad who defected from a group of Raph and Shiv, evil nomad who break the rules of the nomad lifestyle and of the nomad clan and throw away their morals to get an edge in any way possible, murdering innocents, siding with corporations. However, as he became part of this new Edgerunners crew, he slowly shed that old lifestyle, and when the crew became friends with an Aldecaldo clan outside of Night City, he was given the opportunity to become their leader. Now, this player knew that his character was hovering between 0 and 3 empathy at various points in our campaign, and though a large part of him wanted to believe that he really could change into someone noble, a part of him could sense that fate had something else in store. Helios described having dreams of leading a flock of sheep as a noble shepherd, only to suffer their own transformation into wolves, alike to him, and eventually, as these wolves grow hungry, they turn against him. In our last session, Helios was at 1 empathy, already beginning to exhibit several of the traits of the hair psychopathy checklist. After suffering a terrible ambush from a Raph and Shiv group, they had the Raph and Shiv on their knees and began asking them what their plans were and whether they were going to continue to attack the clan and where this next front would be. After Helios got his answers, he snapped. He raised the butt of his gun and he bashed in the head of this Raph and Shiv who had thrown away his weapons, who had been cooperating, and killed him horribly and brutally without mercy. I called for the player to roll 2d6 to determine how much humanity Helios would lose for outright murdering a helpless and surrendered enemy combatant in a grisly and inhumane way. This dropped Helios's empathy to just above 0, teetering on the edge of cyberpsychosis, and the player decided that Helios would begin to suffer a cyberpsychotic episode when a member of his nomad family tried to call him out, told him that he needed to take a break, that he was taking things too far. He could not stand this imposition against his leadership, and he attacked them. Because he attacked a family member, Helios was stripped of his position as clan leader and is now no longer a part of the Aldecaldos clan. We play at a table in which this kind of real consequence storytelling is a big part of the reason why we love playing Cyberpunk. And everyone at the table ended that moment of the session somber and with a heavy weight on our hearts. But all of us were excited and anticipating what could possibly come next in Helios' story. And I too look forward to discovering the fate of Helios. Will he still get his shot at redemption, or will this rejection be the last rejection, the last obstacle, the last inconvenience that sends him permanently soaring over the edge? If you made it to the end of this video, leave me a little ghost so that I know that you are a real one. I really appreciate you spending this time with me. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to do the thing. And until next time, stay safe out there on the mean streets of Night City. This is Phantom, signing off.